Hi, everybody, and welcome to the As You Are podcast. My name is Leslie Vandergenst, and I am the founder of Enso Coaching and Consulting. And I'm here with two of our amazing coaches, Libby and Adam.
Hello.
And we are so excited to interview the amazing Scott Hickle,
Yay.
who is the CEO and co-founder of Throne.
That's it.
That's it. So, Scott, you've got to tell us a little bit about Throne. You know, high level. Tell us about this amazing company that you're building.
So Throne is a device to monitor gut health and hydration from your toilet. We joke it's like Whoop for your poop or Aura for your flora.
Whoop for your poop. I love it.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
Or the shit bit.
Oh,
This is
We all clearly.
Oh,
I know.
If this is an
The
A/B
shit.
test,
Yeah,
we all
exactly.
clearly.
Yeah.
And we're like shit bit. That's
Yeah,
that's the one.
These are landing. This is good.
I know.
We market research.
That's amazing. Okay, and so Whoop for your poop, shit bit. So
Mhm.
tell us about that.
Correct. So basically what we recognize is everything in healthcare seems to be converging towards continuous passive monitoring. You have, 50 devices that can track your cardio health, Whoop, Aura, Garmin's, Apple Watch. You have another, half dozen to track like continuous like ketones or continuous glucose monitors. And there's all these sleep tracking devices and nothing looking at gut health or hydration, despite the fact that, especially in the last 5 years, there's been, I think, a growing awareness really since COVID about just the importance of gut health as a pillar of overall health. And, obviously hydration is one of those things that, wake up in the morning, you're feeling bad and should probably drink water instead of coffee. But like no one has that nudge.
Yeah.
Like anywhere between 25% and 75% of Americans are walking around chronically dehydrated. And I think, just in general, what gets measured gets managed. And right now there's a lot that we're not measuring despite, there being a tremendous amount of health data flushed down the toilet every day.
Oh.
My gosh, that's so crazy. Okay, so how can you tell us how does it work? Like,
Yeah, so it's a downward facing camera, like emphasis on downwards.
Yeah. Someone gets to really, like, I can't imagine. Like,
Facing down.
yeah.
Flips onto the side of the toilet.
okay.
Facing down. And every time you use the restroom, you push a little button and then you go and you push it again after you flush. That's prototype. What we're moving towards is completely hands-free, so it'll use motion sensing. But the goal is ultimately, you use the bathroom, it turns on, tracks, turns off, and then extracts the health information, deletes the video, and move on. But it's all computer vision based. So we're using AI and basically, looking at the health of your bowel movements and your pee.
So you don't have to buy a whole new toilet. This just hooks on.
Correct. It just
To your toilet.
clips onto the side of the toilet. Yeah.
Oh, really
Right.
smart cost-wise,
Very
right?
smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you had to do a whole new toilet, the only people doing that are like new builds and renovations.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Tiling and plumbing now. That's like crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, that is amazing. Okay, so it's a video monitor, and then does it go to a device or how?
Oh, yeah. It goes to an app.
Goes to an app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it goes to an app, and then you get a push notification, 5 minutes after you go that said, hey, your session's been processed. Here's how hydrated you were. And then here's all your poop data. And, you don't see the pictures. You just see the health information.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. You go back and
Unless you
revisit.
want.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
So what kinds of things does it measure? What can it tell you?
So the big ones are, on the stool side, there's frequency and consistency. Those two are like diagnostic of IBS, right? Irritable bowel syndrome.
Mhm.
So that's defined as changes in the frequency and consistency of your bowel movements associated with like unpleasant abdominal symptoms over the past, 3 to 6 months. So like those are the two big ones. And then looking at hydration, obviously, the next ones we're working on are strain. So that's, the distribution of evacuation events over a toilet session, combined with their consistency. So like one of our advisors is a gastroenterologist, and the way he explained that, right, is if you have like a healthy bowel movement and then you sit there for like 20, 30 minutes, you're probably just scrolling your phone trying to avoid work.
Yeah.
Whereas like,
Hiding from your children.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But like if you have like, several like, hard, like spread out over 25 minutes, you're probably pushing really hard. And like that's obviously something that like a gastroenterologist would be like curious to know for their patients who have like chronic constipation or IBS.
Yeah.
And the next one is digestive transit time. So that involves eating either like a baked good with a lot of blue dye, or like I just put it in a smoothie, but you basically like ingest some blue dye and then track how long it takes end to end, because that allows us to start then doing correlations for like your diet and your bowel movements and say, hey, you know, we noticed you had an unhealthy movement. Like, what did you eat 16 hours ago or, you know, 16 to 20 hours ago that might have, you know, triggered that? So we can start to build out a profile of like your personal dietary tolerance or intolerances and sensitivities. The next one is urinary flow rate. So that actually involves a microphone, and that is mapping the amplitude of the sound of the stream entering the water basin to get to your flow rate. And that's mostly relevant.
It's like,
Yeah. So that's
vocalists.
yeah.
They need this.
Yeah.
More intense, clear water. Yeah. Exactly.
Collab.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to see your pee
Amazing.
data before we
I love it. I
move
love
forward.
it.
And that's mostly from prostate health. So
Yeah.
50% of men in their 50s and 80% of men by the time we reach 70 have what's called benign prostatic hyperplasia. So that's non-cancerous enlargement of the prostate that impinges your urethra and makes it harder to pee. And so the way you would track that is by peak urinary flow rate. And then, you know, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but like longer term, the vision would be to incorporate, you know, hyperspectral or multispectral imaging to look for trace amounts of blood to ultimately, you know, not detect colon cancer, but detect the early signs of colon cancer, which are fecal occult blood, and then send people to the doctor and say, hey, you know, we can't be diagnostic. There's a lot of things that can cause blood in your stool, but
Sure.
we do see a pattern that's concerning, and you should probably go talk to your gastroenterologist about that.
Yeah.
Ugh, this is absolutely. So how did you guys come up with this? This is brilliant.
Yeah.
How did you guys come up with this idea?
So my now co-founder, Tim, we met back in 2021. He had moved to Austin as part of the exodus from San Francisco during COVID. And one of our former colleagues and my best friend from college, Kaylin, knew Tim and was like, hey, you should meet Scott when he's in Austin. So I brought Tim into our poker game, and we were sitting around the poker table talking about bad startup ideas. The specific conversation was startups you'd love to start but wouldn't want your name associated with. And Tim was like, I want to measure your poop. I've been talking about this with my friends since college. I think it's a great idea. And I was like, that's hilarious. Like, clearly, you know, that company's called Throne.
Yes.
It's the perfect name.
Yeah.
Fast forward 3 years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Actually.
And
But like, it was one of those ideas that like I was like, you know, name it Throne, put a leaderboard on it, sell it into frat houses.
Yeah.
And like, you know, around the poker table, that killed.
yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
that was
and it became one of those like topics of conversation that just kind of keeps coming back up in a friend group.
Yeah.
And Tim and I would text about it. And so, you know, long story short, Tim and I ended up working together at the last company I was at. I recruited him. We treated that as dating before marriage. We knew we wanted to start something together. Didn't know what.
Awesome.
We left to go start something else in healthcare staffing. He has a mom and 3 sisters that are nurses. And so that was something we had a little bit of insight into. Pretty quickly realized we didn't want to do that. But we'd already raised a little bit of money. And so, you know, we were like, shoot, what do we do? Do we give the money back or go back to the drawing board? And our investors were like, you know, take a few weeks and figure it out. And at that point, I called my mom, who's a geriatrician, so like old people, primary care physician. And I was like, hey, mom, is there any like medical utility to like looking at people's poop? And she goes verbatim, like one of those phone calls that just like changes your life, right? She goes like, honey, like my patients send me so many pictures of poop. I have stopped giving them my phone number. Like it's excessive.
yeah. Yeah.
And I was
Amazing.
like, whoa. And so that was like the first like light bulb moment. Like there might
Okay,
be
this
something
is
there.
real. Ugh, that is just amazing.
And I think it's cool too, because we now know that, and as I understand it, IBS, a lot of people in the medical community are changing the terminology to like brain gut disorder, because we know like the neurotransmitters and things that we find, serotonin, all of those sorts of things that we find in the brain are also found in large amounts in the gut. And so, so much of that. So I just think also for mental health, all of these utilities that you probably wouldn't even think of that will be discovered certainly as this progresses, I think is amazing.
Yeah. So how is there any I have so many questions, but I'll start with one. Is there any differentiation around like, you know, men, women, like how those things get measured, or is it, you know, is it kind of gender neutral or?
It's gender neutral. But there are like, so for example, like urinary flow rate is pretty much like uniform across women. It's just far less variant. But for men, it is like one of the key indicators of prostate health. It's like that metric just matters less for a woman.
Right.
Whereas like on the flip side, like, you know, on the roadmap, haven't built this yet, but like cycle tracking, that's definitely something we could do in theory. And like, obviously that's just not going to be relevant for men.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your relationship with your co-founder, because we're, you know, people who really believe that, you know, getting into a relationship with the right people really matters. And so, you know, you just mentioned like we were dating a little bit and we needed to decide whether or not this is going to be a long-term long-term fit. Well, what was it about him specifically that you were like, we've got to go do this together?
Okay, so a few things. I recruited him to the last company I was at to be one of our first engineers. One of our first engineers. And basically from like the day he joined, we spent every Thursday morning getting coffee and talking about like, hey, like how are things going? Like what would we do different if we were, you know, the founders of this company? And like most importantly, like what do we think we want to start next together?
Yeah.
And we did that for probably a year and a half. So we, you know, and on top of that, we worked closely together. He was on my team. You know, we built a lot of products together in a very short period of time, and like developed like an actual working relationship, like, you know, a mutual respect for each other's like work product and, you know, aspirations and motivation and diligence. And Tim is candidly just like the most talented engineer I've ever worked with. And like I've you know, worked in tech for 10 years. I studied engineering undergrad. He is the quintessential, like, you know, 10x engineer. He's the guy who, when he's not building things, he is like, his hobby is engineering and he's building like tinkering at home. And then when he's not tinkering, he's listening to podcasts about engineering.
Passion.
It's his passion. Yeah. And he is deeply motivated to like build something meaningful in the world. And, you know, we both came from healthcare families. Like both my parents are physicians. His, you know, obviously has a bunch of nurses in his family. And, we pretty quickly, I think we're just very aligned on the idea of like Throne sounded crazy, but we were both very motivated by the idea of building like a physical hardware product that could like actually meaningfully impact people's lives. Because like software, I think we see the world very similarly in that software, especially now with like, you know, like ChatGPT and, you know, all these LLMs that can code for you. It's just the value of software is going to be like diminishing in the next decade, whereas like hardware that interacts with the real world and captures like, you know, unique data sets is just a much more interesting opportunity now that you can feed that into, you know, proprietary AI models. Yeah, so we just, I think, see the world similarly and enjoy talking about the same things and are both, you know, unashamed of being the poop guys.
Yeah.
What's your mom say now?
Yeah.
My mom has just been incredibly supportive the whole time. Like, it's funny. My dad hated the idea at first.
Really?
He's an anesthesiologist and spent most of the last 3 decades of his life doing medical devices, actually.
Yeah.
And he thought he did not see it as that exciting until, I don't know, maybe 6 months into it, and something changed. And now his joke is like, man, this is the best idea I've ever had.
Oh, damn. All right.
Yeah. I love it. Well, so when you were just talking about how you guys would sit down and say, like, if we were running this company, we would do it differently. Yeah. What specifically, like, did you say this is what we would do differently, or this is what?
So, I think the biggest thing is Royal raised a lot of money very early on and hired a pretty big team. We have raised a little money and have a very small team. And that's been, I think, very important for us. Is just we generally, like, there's a sweet spot of like, you build so fast as a very small team, and there's definitely diminishing returns to scale as you continue to hire, right? So, you know, the next hire is not, you know, one new person's worth of work. It's like 0.9 people's, and then the next hire is like 0.8 people.
Right.
And we are going to stay as small as possible for as long as possible, just because it forces us, A, to be judicious in choosing what projects we tackle,
right,
and B, like, we get those projects done really fast.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about, as the CEO of this startup, like how do you think about building the team? Like what are you looking for as you're adding it? Because again, if we have to be really selective about the people that we bring on, how are we purposeful about?
It depends on the role, right? And so Tim and I, both engineering backgrounds, but neither of us have health backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things we did was like seek out advisors. And, the good news is like informing what to build takes, relatively little time,
Mhm.
but actually building it takes most of the time.
Right.
So we found some really world-class experts. One of our advisors is the head of gastroenterology at University of Chicago. We've talked to another, dozen gastroenterologists and urologists and nutritionists and functional medicine doctors. So that's been very helpful, but like a lot of those we contracted.
Mm-hmm.
For the full-time team, we needed another engineer, and the main thing we looked for there was just like, are you incredibly talented as an engineer, right? Like, do you love engineering? And like, do you have a high standard for quality? Because like building software for consumers is just a much higher bar than building software for like the real estate agents that we used to build for at Keller Williams, right?
Right.
Like when you're building for a business, people are like generally just more forgiving, and the quality of software can be lower.
Mhm.
Like, and if you have issues, you can phone into customer support.
Yeah.
Consumers, like,
Yeah.
we expect Apple-like quality for everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
a really
so-
good point.
That was, one of our biggest things for our like engineer that built the app, Kyle. And then we brought on a marketing generalist, product manager, ops person, Catherine. And the big thing there was, like, I've known Catherine for years. Like, she's a friend. Like, we met originally through Twitter like 4 or 5 years ago, but like actually like talk all the time, like became really good friends. And I just have tremendous respect for her as a like health thinker.
Mhm.
She's like so deep in the literature. And so, it was just like very important to me that like an early team member was a woman, because that's, there's a whole cohort of women's health issues that I can't speak to or empathize with. Right.
Right.
And like, we needed that on the team early.
Yeah.
And Catherine is like an incredibly powerful voice, not just as a woman, but just as someone who is health conscientious writ large.
Oh, that's really smart. Love that. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think I remember is on LinkedIn, you had posted some stuff around things that you were going to do as you guys were kind of testing the product. Can you talk? Is that accurate? That you did like some eating.
Oh, yeah.
thing
Yeah.
and, like, I'm so curious about what that looked like and like what was the result. Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
what, and I think there's something to be said for like as the CEO, you've got to go do the stuff too
Yeah.
to,
See
see.
what-
And
yeah.
so I'm curious about that journey and that process for you.
So that was inspired, going back to Adam's kind of, commentary about the mind-gut axis.
Yeah.
We let go of a team member back in May, and that was like one of the most stressful days.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
Like,
Oh.
it's just, it's especially on a team that small, right? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
it's very tough. And that day I was wearing an Aura ring at the time, and Aura was like, "This is the most stressful day you have
Your
had
life.
in
Yeah.
a very
Thanks,
long
Aura.
time." Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Since you
Got it.
started
Yeah.
wearing me. And that same day, like, I look back at my gut health graph, and like, I had like, I swung the full spectrum from like, woke up that morning like diuretic, and then healthy, and then constipated by the end of the day in like 9 hours.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like I'm someone who's like generally like, incredibly blessed to have a healthy gut, and like to see just the way stress impacted me in that acute like, one day
Yeah.
was crazy to me. So then I was like, okay, so like the mind gut axis, right? The arrow pointing from my brain to my gut is like very strong, right? Like my psychology dominates my physiology.
Mm.
But I was like, what happens if I try to intentionally throw off my gut? Like, what does that do to my mental health? And so I committed to eating 100% of my calories from ultra processed foods throughout the month of June.
Yeah.
And it was, somewhat inspired by Morgan Spurlock's Supersize Me.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Kind of
mhm.
a similar 30-day challenge. The difference being I wasn't, eating just McDonald's. I wasn't eating, 5 to 10,000 calories a day. I basically like continued all my other healthy lifestyle stuff, right? Like I continued to exercise 4 times a week.
Yeah.
I was still clocking, on average, like 14,000 steps a day. I was only eating 3,200 calories a day. Like I was very religious about like counting every calorie. It's just the quality of my calories went from being like, healthy whole foods to like gas station food or like, ultra processed foods. And that experience was interesting because it absolutely wrecked my mental health.
Really?
Yeah, but like, and so I tracked. I tracked, like, I wore an Oura ring, I wore my Whoop strap, I used Throne, obviously, I wore a continuous glucose monitor throughout the entire thing. I did blood tests before and after, I did microbiome tests before and after, I did DEXA scans before and after. And some of the most interesting results were I went from like having no inflammatory markers in my gut to having, elevated calprotectin and lactoferrin, which are inflammatory markers. So I was, definitely damaging my colon. My mood, so I would measure my like self-reported like mood, energy, focus, and stress 3 times a day. I also did blood pressure, and like my blood pressure was super volatile. And then my mood, energy, focus, and stress like started great. Like actually for the first like week it was elevated because like in part because switching from like healthy foods to ultra processed just meant eating a lot more carbs and like just having
happy.
Yeah, exactly. Just like way more energy.
Yeah.
But then by weeks 3 and 4, I was tanking and just like miserable. And the big learning for me was like the correlation with the glucose monitor. I have a brother who's like hypoglycemic, and like growing up, my mom would always, check his blood, like check his glucose with like the little finger sticks. And basically if he was, hypoglycemic, she would feed him before like even engaging with the further conversation.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You're going to get like a demon.
Exactly. And I always thought that was a him thing.
Yeah.
No.
No.
That's a me thing too. And I just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
But like when my blood, and it's less about the absolute level, but like when my blood sugar's spiking, I feel invincible. And when it's crashing, I'm like an alligator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I was just having way more spikes and crashes, and like overall, like incredibly informative experience.
Right.
Like learned a lot about myself and my own physiology, my own psychology.
Yeah.
But like would never do that again.
Yeah.
Cannot recommend.
Yeah. Well, and then how did you take all of that information, and then what did that look like for the next iteration of Throne?
So the biggest like direct feedback for the product was we have this what we call a gut health score, which is like just a composite score looking at over like the consistency and frequency of your bowel movements and grading you. So like, if you're having like one healthy bowel movement a day for like a week, gut health score of 100, right?
Yeah.
But if you're having like more than 3 a day or like less than 1 every couple days, you start to decline. And then obviously like, the consistency matters as well. And so there were like a couple days where specifically donut day and spicy day.
Donut day and spicy day.
Here's where it all goes
Yeah.
downhill.
Yeah. And like, it was, I don't know how graphic I can be here, but like it was, it was like spicy days are the closest I've ever come to shitting myself.
Yeah.
Like I was just like there's this urgency is like, that's the phrase they use in medicine. And like, did you have a feeling of urgency? And I was like walking the lake with a buddy of mine, and I'm like, I've got about 100 yards left in me, right? Like
you're like, this is a mistake.
Like,
We've
whoa. And like, my gut health score for that day was like 85%. I'm like, like that's just not an accurate reflection of like how I feel right now. Like similar with donut day. Like I ate 3,200 calories worth of Krispy Kremes one day, and like I was not right for 2 days after that. And like similarly, like, my gut health score just did not accurately reflect. So like the big learning there was like, obviously when you're using like a Whoop or an Oura ring, like the score you see has to align with how your body feels for you to find it credible.
Yeah.
And like those days, this was the first iteration of our algorithms and stuff, but like those days, like I was like, no, we're not even like, I feel like here, like a 20%.
Yeah.
And like the algorithms like tell me I'm like, way higher than that. That's just not right. And so the big learning there was like, when you have a bad gut health episode, like the score should be way lower and like be slower to climb up, right?
Right.
Like it takes a few days to
get everything right
get everything
again.
exactly. And so there's like a dampening effect there, but like it needs to be very responsive to bad episodes and then like slower to recover.
Yeah.
Is there anything, so I mean, whatever score you get, do you guys provide any kind of like, here's what you could do to help your score, or here's what we,
Not yet. That's,
Yeah.
we're still in beta. We've,
sure.
team of 4 building for a year.
Yeah.
But that's ultimately where we're going to go, is like incorporating coaching into the app.
Mm.
And then, not just looking at, your outputs data, but correlating that to your inputs data. So you're obviously your diet.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to integrate this with like my Whoop, so I can see like, how do like exercise and sleep correlate with my gut health and hydration. It's funny, literally one of our early beta testers has been using this for about a year now. And he texted me as I was pulling into the parking lot. He was like, when do I get an AI coach in this app?
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
yeah.
That's really smart. Oh, I love it.
Was there ever a time when you thought this is not going to happen?
So the early days, basically since we committed to making this happen, I haven't had that reservation. But
Amazing.
I think the earliest days were when Tim and I were still just exploring, like, what are the opportunities in the space? Like, what could we build here? And the very first conversation we had around a camera was like, surely not, right? Like, nobody would ever go for a camera in their toilet. That's crazy. Like, now we joke, like, some people think it's crazy to put a camera in your toilet. We think it's crazy not to. And like, I actually think that's true.
Yeah.
But like, at the very beginning, it was, let's go interview like strangers outside of Trader Joe's and like the gyms on the east side, and just like see if this, because like just he and I in a vacuum talking about it, we're like, there's no way.
Yeah.
There's just
Right.
no
Yeah.
Right.
way. But like, there's very much a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what gave you the confidence to say, to your point, like, this is, I feel like this is the right thing.
First was talking to people, right? That was by far the most helpful thing, was like looking in someone's eyes and be like, hey, if we can monitor gut health and hydration, is that something you'd be interested in? And every single person we asked that question to was like, yeah, I'd like be interested to learn more about that.
Mhm.
And then we'd ask them another series of like 5-10 questions. And the last one was always, okay, but like, let's say now we're doing this with like a camera in your toilet, pointing down.
It's always the point
To be clear.
that has to be.
Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
And our expectation was that everybody would be like, no, like,
Yeah.
hard pass, swerve. And like every single person that made it to that point in the conversation was like, yeah, like, I don't care. Like, bring it on. Like, one guy was like, where can I invest? And Tim and I were just like, what?
Yeah.
It's
These people-
amazing.
Are we the crazy ones, or are they crazy?
We found our people.
But like,
Yeah.
turns out like, it's a somewhat polarizing idea, but like way more people love it than hate it, which
Right.
is actually
Well, I think to your point, like, there's a lot of these things that have kind of primed the idea,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And so it's
Like gut
hopeful.
health is so, I mean, I
It is a
can't get on
topic.
any like Instagram or TikTok without something
Mhm.
for
Mm.
here's this for your gut health, here's this, here's what I'm eating to. I mean, I think it's very much rightfully so. So many things have been linked to gut health because it is kind of like the center of everything.
Yeah.
And I do think the awareness that has been brought to it,
It's
it seems like
helpful.
it would be the perfect time to launch
I
something like
couldn't agree more. And so it's just we stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, I don't think we're ever going to be the first like health monitor, but because we live in a world where Whoop and Apple Watch,
Mhm.
one in 6 Americans checks a wearable device every single day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's crazy.
that. You don't even have to wear this.
Yeah.
Not one more thing.
Yeah.
I think that's nice too. Is sometimes it's like it's not one more thing that you have to like strap to yourself or like remember to put on. You just
Go
start
poo-poo.
just go poop and go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and people like fascinating things too, I
Yeah.
think, just in general. And
Yeah.
like when Leslie was like, guess what tomorrow's podcast episode's going to be? I was like,
All about poop. Yeah.
I'm very interested to hear where this heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, so in this whole process of, finding a partner, going through the ideation and the iterations, building the team, getting these investors, to engage with you, like, what have been some of the big learnings that you've had personally?
I'll be very honest. This whole thing has made me like far more candidly spiritual, right? Like I like, we have this like phrase in the office, like mandate of heaven, which is like so many things go improbably right. That like we could never have asked for things to go as right as they sometimes do.
Mhm.
And like probably once a week, we're just like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah.
like
It's
know,
happening.
yeah, like we got in Men's Health, like we haven't even launched yet, like Mandate of Heaven, you know?
So you got featured in Men's Health.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's badass.
so cool.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
And so and that's just like one of like, literally like one a week for the last year. There's probably 50 things, like no exaggeration. And so it's just made me like, when things are, when you're like tapped into something that, like, the world clearly like is ready for, like things go right that you could not have anticipated.
Yeah.
And like, that's been so just like incredible to be a part of and like experience on like I said, like a weekly, daily basis. Just made me like, okay, there's things in this world that I do not understand, but am just deeply, deeply grateful to be a part of.
Yeah. And so with that, being more spiritual, like how do you show up on a day-to-day basis with your team, with, your
Stoked.
Yeah.
I love it.
Like I get to work on, I mean, again, we were talking about a little bit before we recorded the podcast, but like, so I look back at like my life, right? Like both my parents are physicians. My dad's a medical device inventor. I grew up in a lab. Like he's an actual like mad scientist, right? Like, like quick detour, but like he like would take home like human fat samples to our kitchen and like be doing experiments in the kitchen, and my stepmom would be like walking like, what are you doing with my cookware? Like that is like completely unacceptable.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
great.
Like and so my whole life I avoided healthcare because like, big shoes to fill, right? Like two doctors or parents, like, and they're like, they both are good at what they do. Like I thought for sure I would like go, forge my own path somewhere else.
Yeah.
I studied mechanical engineering undergrad because like I knew I wanted to go do something in tech, but like wasn't sure what. I spent the last decade of my career in software, and like this is like smack dab in the middle of like all three of those things, right?
Yeah.
Like my healthcare family, like hardware, mechanical engineering, like software, like it is so wild to me.
The world was like,
But like, yeah, exactly. Like if you'd told me again, like if you'd told me like, 20 years ago, like this would be what I get to work on, and like this is my calling in life, like I'd have believed you, but like not really, It's like it's like too good to be true. Like and like there's this concept in like startups of like founder market fit, right? Which is like how well does like the thing you are working on align with like your personality, your motivations, your interests, like your skills. And like, this is just like hand in glove, like perfect. Like I love so much that like, I have the skill set to like be able to talk about the like, hardware component. Like I can do the software stuff and like talk that language. Like I can also, I'm very fortunate. Like I'm not someone who like empathizes with the gut health stuff, because like I'm blessed with like a generally healthy gut, but like a lot of people who work in this space or like are attracted to this space, like don't treat it necessarily with the appropriate reverence, I think. Because like it's not just poop jokes, right? Like for people that have like chronic gut health conditions, govern their lives, like totally.
Absolutely.
And like so like navigating just the conversations with like the appropriate respect and like reverence for like the fact that like it is for those impacted, the number one thing dictating how they live day to day. While at the same time, like getting on calls with them and like, yeah, we're talking about poop and it's gonna be funny and we're gonna laugh a lot. And like, it's just, I don't know. Like, it's just the most perfect thing.
Hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
Did you always know you wanted? Oh, sorry.
No,
go ahead.
you go.
Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur at some point?
Yeah. So my dad's an inventor, like started his own companies, actually in part inspired by like complications of my birth. And so like apples and trees, right? Like I just like I'm Randall Scott Hickle the second.
Yeah.
I knew from a very early age that I wanted to do my own things, but like I had no idea what it was going to be.
Amazing.
It's so cool. I think too, what's really important is, you mentioned, down the road having things so it can measure like potential colon cancer, things like that. But it's also just opening it up and having the conversation about it, because so many people say, you'll hear doctors say, or people that have symptoms of stuff that don't do anything because it's embarrassing or whatever. And just opening up the conversation more so people can like talk about their poop.
Accessible, right?
Yes. And making it, and having some kind of barometer for what's normal, what's not normal, and just not having the conversation be as like taboo, I guess.
On a 3-person text string and just being like, That's
Yeah.
not explosive diarrhea, friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I think part of it is just getting the knowledge out
so
there.
normal for us. But not for everyone.
You know,
No, but like,
Yeah.
so like,
some people,
yeah.
not this person. We'll all talk about it, but other people.
So like NPR ran a story about this last year called Poop Friends, which is like there's a special inner circle amongst your friends.
Yeah.
Like those are the people you can talk about your poops with.
Yeah.
And like my goal is to just make everyone on the planet
a poop
my
friend.
poop friend. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
And, like,
a great goal.
It's actually like so fun because like
Yeah.
people text me be like, "Hey, I would not text anyone else this." I'm like, lay it on me.
Let's have it. Oh my
Let's
God.
get weird.
Yeah.
More data.
Yeah.
Yeah. More poop data.
But to your point, like the breaking the conversation open, like I think there was a moment last summer before we like had fully committed to this, like early in the summer, probably like May or June. I was like out with some friends, like, and it was a group, like I knew one person there and they brought me into a group of like a dozen people.
Uh-huh.
And that group spent fully 45 minutes talking about fecal matter transplants as a like, treatment modality for people with gut dysbiosis. And like,
Oh.
so the crazy thing about fecal matter transplants is like, if you have a bad gut microbiome, you can like, there's kind of two different ways that you can ingest it, but like you can, swap out your gut microbiome by supplementing it with someone else's by actually like either like eating capsules with fecal matter in them or and like, but like the crazy thing is it's so effective. They did a study on this and they stopped the study midway through the trial because they found it was unethical to have a placebo who was not getting the actual thing because it's just that it was like a 97% like hit rate. Like it's insane. Like, go fact check me on the specifics, but like that is a crazy like efficacy.
Yeah.
And so they spent like 45 minutes talking about this and it was a bunch of strangers. Like I knew none of them, but like at the same time I was like contemplating like we were still thinking about throne. Like that was one of the first moments I was like, whoa, like
This is like a thing.
this
People
is
are-
exactly like
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
like people can talk about this in polite company
Yeah.
in a way that like, middle school me from Lubbock, Texas would never.
Yeah.
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 Well, even when we started the conversation, it was very like, you didn't say poop once, like
Yeah.
you've like created a like polite language around it also. Like it seems like there's kind of something nice and gentlemanly about it.
There was like there was something of like your evacuation. I was like, wow.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
That's good.
Learning
new
there's the
language.
stereomedical terminology,
there you
and then there's
go.
the real world talk.
Yeah,
And,
real
like,
word.
I like to start prim and proper.
I think
then-
both. You read the room. You
Yeah.
feel
Yeah,
That's it.
correct.
Yeah. You're like, this room. Yeah.
Poop friends.
We're
That's
going
right.
straight for
That's
the
right.
friends.
They love shit
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
That shit.
We're on it.
That was the
We're
ding,
on
ding,
it.
ding, ding. Okay, so Scott, so right now, like, where are you guys in the? Because you've kind of mentioned angel investors. You've got some like big key, some you've done some raising, and then like, what's next for Throne?
So what the next year is going to look like for us, we are shipping our first 100 beta devices like in the next 3 weeks. So we have the first 10 assembled at the office like as of Friday. So that means those are going out the door this week. Like I'm so excited. We're shipping the next batch of devices in spring. That'll be, so this is like 100. We're shipping another probably 300 to 500 in like March, April. And that's an improved version of the device. It's like half the size and is actually waterproof. This one, like we ship it with a card that's like mind your aim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Love it.
It's the prototype. It's the quickest we could get something out the door to you.
Yeah.
But be careful. The next version of the device is the one I'm most excited about. That goes out next summer, and that's going to have motion sensing, and that's the one that like totally hands-free, right? Just have your phone with you,
Yeah.
and you walk in. Motion sensing wakes up the device and says, who's here? Oh, that's Libby's phone. This must be Libby.
Hey, what up?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like that feels magical to me. Like just this idea that like you just like, because everyone has their phone on them 90% of the time anyway. So like just going about your day-to-day life, but like getting more information about yourself, like that's awesome.
That's
like,
really
Yeah.
So that version will ship next summer. And then, assuming that's all copacetic and it's not like, don't have any components failing, and then we scale up and do like a big launch and try and get, thousands of these under Christmas trees for
Yes.
That's
2025.
I love it.
That's amazing. Ugh. Also, I just love your passion. This is a
I
side
was going to
note.
say
Like,
the
it's
same
really
thing.
so
It's
sweet.
very genuine.
Yeah.
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 Very
It's
genuine.
the greatest thing I've ever worked on. It's so fun.
I love it. I love it. Oh, this is so great.
I know.
Ugh.
I'm obsessed.
Well,
What
wish we
season
had,
are
like,
we on?
another hour.
Season 5 or
No.
whatever. We need to come
I
back.
know.
yeah.
We're gonna
Oh,
have
yeah,
to
for
circle back
sure.
and
Yeah. You'll
see.
have to come back and
Yeah.
I mean, this
we
is
can
just-
all sit on the podcast and talk about our own poop because
That's
we
right.
all have thrones.
We'll all have thrones.
Amazing.
And we
Yeah.
can talk about
that's
what
right.
the
I'm
data that we've
obsessed.
gathered.
That's
I'm
right.
considered
Yeah.
done. Considered done.
Yeah.
Adam will be like, drink
I would
more
love
water.
that.
Later.
Always. Nothing's changed.
No,
there.
that would be so great. Ugh, Scott, this was awesome.
It was awesome.
I wish we had like another hour because I have
I
so
know.
many more
Seriously,
questions.
I know.
It's so
fascinating.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
More to come.
I know.
Well, where do people find information?
So our website's thronescience.com, and we're on Instagram and Twitter. Just Throne Science is our handle. And if you ever have any questions, just scott@thronescience.com.
Oh,
Amazing.
you're the best. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so
congrats.
much,
Yep.
Adam. It means a lot.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. And as always, subscribe to the As You Are podcast on all channels and ensocc.com if you got questions for us. Otherwise, we will see you soon.